Good morning. We are on the record. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's meeting with respect to the Universal Electric Service Program in case number 8903. By notice issued on July 22nd, 2021, this has been designated as the time and place for the Commission to review the proposed operations plan for fiscal year 2022 for the Maryland Department of Human Services, Family Investment Administration, and Office of Home Energy Programs proposal for the coming fiscal year. Although OHEP administers this very important program, it is the Commission who has responsibility for the oversight of the budget and the funding of various programs. As we know, most of the funds are composed of both ratepayer funds and funds received from the Strategic Investment Fund, which revenues are coming from the RGGI program, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative program. We had a number of parties that timely filed comments in response to OHEP's proposal. Those include comments from the Baltimore Gas Electric Company, the Cancer Support Foundation, the Office of People's Counsel, as well as the Commission staff. These parties have all received designated times allotted to them to present and speak today. Additionally, at the very end, we will have an opportunity for any interested members of the public to provide testimony for the Commission. So we will get started today. We are on the record, so when parties are going to speak, please state and spell your name for the record, and then you may begin your presentation. I'd like to begin this morning by recognizing Mr. Bill Freeman. Mr. Freeman is the Director of the Office of Home Energy Programs. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek and members of the Commission. This is Bill Freeman, B-I-L-L-F-R-E-E-M-A-N. As noted, I am the Director of the Office of Home Energy Programs. I'd like to thank you for having me here this morning. This is my fifth and final time addressing the Commission on the annual Electric Universal Service Plan before this Commission. I'll be moving on from this position next week. We'll look forward to advising you in terms of my replacement in the near future. I want to thank everybody, the commissioners, commission staff, for their support and guidance over these last few years. I also want to thank our local administering agencies who do all the hard work, our utility partners who are always incredible in terms of coordination and working closely with us. I want to thank the advocates and partners, especially the Cancer Support Foundation and Cindy Carter and her tremendous work in establishing the Critical Medical Needs Program and other efforts that she's taken in recent years. And really everyone who through this process provides valuable feedback to continue to improve operations and make sure that Marylanders have access to energy assistance to keep their power on, to keep their homes heated, and to stay safe. As you know, and as the Commissioner mentioned, through the Office of Home Energy Programs, the Department of Human Services is responsible for administering the Electric Universal Service Program. We also administer the Federal Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program within the state of Maryland, and those two programs work in close conjunction with one another. The EUSP statute does give the Commission the oversight responsibility for the Electric Universal Service Program. And this year, I just highlight, as noted in our plan, we do plan to spend the Electric Universal Service Program ratepayer funds on bill payment assistance, which is the Electric Bill Payment Assistance Program. The MEAP funds, which is what we call LIHEAP funds in the state of Maryland, and the increase in the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Funds up to about $32 million will ensure that there's adequate funding for all the other benefit programs, for the arrearage programs, and for the heating program in the state. So this year, once again, the ratepayer funds are limited to electric bill payment uses, in addition to the administrative funds and some outreach costs to continue to improve reaching out to new customers and re-engaging those old customers. So certainly the last 18 months have been challenging for Maryland, many Maryland residents. The moratorium on terminations of service was a lifesaver for so many families. And really the Commission's work in successfully exiting that moratorium was admirable. I want to say one of the great collaborative moments in recent years was the utilities provision of 45-day termination notice lists to OHEP's central office and also the local agencies. The provision of those lists offered an amazing opportunity to reach out to those customers who were in danger of termination. They were provided in a timely fashion by the utilities with all the information necessary. We mailed out, as a result, almost 1 million applications to households throughout the state who were facing termination. We really launched our first bulk email campaigns around those lists. And I think it helped a lot of folks who were facing termination for the first time in their lives to know that there was help out there through the programs administered through this office. I also think that the actions taken by this commission and the legislature and the governor in terms of providing Relief Act funds, the commission administered to pay down those arrearages, those funds combined with the supplemental payments made available through OHEP because of the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan have put many households in a better situation coming out of this pandemic than they've been in a number of years. Many of these households have a zero balance for the first time in a good number of years, and it will certainly help them stay on their feet, stay healthy, and keep their family together. In this coming year, there is a continued availability of LIHEAP funds through the American Rescue Plan. We have a pending LIHEAP state plan that will result in our usual allocation of approximately $78 million. So there's a solid $150 million in LIHEAP funds remaining to be spent. And we continue to push outreach for that. In addition, we continue to coordinate with DHCD and those agencies administering the Emergency Rental Assistance Program to ensure that those various funding sources are coordinated and that we can push those funds to where they're needed in a timely fashion. Additionally, I think recent legislation passed this most recent session and eligibility for EUSP in particular, and we also applied that to MEEP going forward. OHEP moved quickly to implement the key elements of that legislation by making necessary policy, process, and systems changes to ensure the legislation was implemented immediately upon its effective date. And as a reminder, and as we note in our plan, those changes include increasing the eligibility to 200% for households with one or more members 67 or older. The legislation reduced the time frame of eligibility for the arrearage benefits from 7 years down to 5 years. It also excluded any arrearage benefits received in calendar years 2020 or 21 from that 5-year calculation to ensure that those who needed a rescue during the pandemic are able to come back should they need that arrearage funding again. And also the legislation provides 3 months for applicants to provide information or fix their applications if they are denied for missing or incomplete information or documentation. We continue to implement this. As a result, we continue to process and finalize some FY21 applications for all programs. We continue to reach out to those customers. We've put mechanisms in place to reach out directly and track those households who are within that 3-month window to assist them with taking advantage of this opportunity to fix older applications and access the benefits for which they are eligible. That legislation also established a work group that will look at various aspects of utility assistance and provide recommendations to the legislature prior to January 1st, 2022. The work group is to be chaired by the Secretary of Human Services, and many of the appointments for that group are in place, and I expect that group to begin its work very soon. I think that work group has an opportunity to adjust some of the barriers to access to energy assistance and streamline a number of processes and increase efficiencies across the board. So, as a citizen, I look forward to seeing the outcomes of that work. Just a quick summary. I don't want to spend too much time going into the weeds on applications, but I noted in the plan that we're up in terms of applications by 8% at the time of the submission. By the time all things were considered, we are up 10% year over year between FY20 and 21. So you may recall last year during the moratorium, we saw a significant dip in applications. The context primarily being that approximately 50% of applications for energy assistance in any given year are accompanied by a turn-off notice or an off-service case. Not seeing that during the moratorium, folks were addressing other needs, not necessarily applying immediately for energy assistance. But as November came along, as the Commission put the mechanisms in place to return to collections in a safe way, we did see applications increase. I think a big part of that was the collaboration with the utilities in terms of the 45-day lists, being notified in a timely fashion of who was receiving termination notices to be able to deliver applications to them in a timely fashion. And so by the end of the fiscal year, all told, we were up 10% in terms of increases in applications. To start this year, applications are down approximately 25% from where they were last year. My sense is that, we've done a lot of work, both the Commission and OHEP, to distribute funds, the LIHEAP supplemental funds, an additional EUSP, additional electric supplemental made available through the budget this year, and also the Relief Act funds, which were major. And so, as noted, a lot of folks are seeing a zero balance for the first time in a long time. I think that's led to a lag in some of the returning customer applications. I would expect that to pick up as some level of normalcy returns and as those balances increase over the course of the year. So I'd anticipate that applications will likely be just about where they were this past year. I think it'll take some time to catch up to that level because of all the funds that went out between really May and July of this year. There was a lot of money going out the door to pay down arrearages and other benefits. So just in closing, funding, we feel is adequate for this year. As noted, the level of strategic energy investment funds is up for the first time in a number of years, up to around 39 million. We have remaining CARES Act funding that has to be spent by September 30th, 2022. So just about a year from now, those funds must be obligated by, and I'm confident that OHEP will be spending that money. As noted by staff and as detailed in the plan, that additional LIHEAP money allows us to increase the targeted percentage of bill we're targeting to pay. We're not increasing the amount coming from EUSP, so that would be around 30% of the bill for all electric households. But the LIHEAP funding allows us to target up to 95% of that bill for the lowest poverty levels. And that will help get that money out the door and get to where it's needed and put folks in a good position moving forward. So with that, we feel the current appropriations are adequate to meet the demand, and that we'll be able to meet the need through this next year and into the future. So with that, I just want to thank you all again and take any questions you may have about the plan and and where we've been this last year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Freeman. On behalf of the Public Service Commission, thank you for your public service. This has been a difficult 18 months. As you noted, this is the first full reporting year where OHEP was operating under the pandemic situation. I never thought it would be as difficult as it is sometimes to get money out the door, but you and your small team over at OHEP have been able to do that. So you have my appreciation and thanks. I do note, as you noted, that there was a lot of legislative action over this past 90-day session in 2021, which further makes the program accessible to low-income electric customers who need the services most, whether it be bill payment or some other type of energy assistance. As the commission, for the first time in its history, ventured into distribution of funds with the $83 million in Relief Act funds, I could attest that it's not necessarily easy to figure out where all these dollars go, but hopefully our experience has resulted in some relief to customers that have been affected by the pandemic. I'll turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions regarding your testimony or the report that you filed. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Freeman. Excuse me. I'd like to echo the chairman's comments regarding your service to the citizens of Maryland. As you know, a bill has been around for many years, even before the days of OHEP, but even back to the time of Fuel Fund. And I've learned that working with low-income consumers and on those low-income issues, it's very difficult to move away from it. It tends to find a way to pull you back into it. So congratulations on being able to have a successful exit. At least we'll see how successful it is.
That's right. That's right.
I had just a general question regarding some of your in your comments and in your operational plan. You mentioned several times the upcoming integration with the Maryland Think initiative. I know that since you're moving on, you won't be here to see it follow through, but could you give me a little understanding as to where we are currently and what type of long-term, what are we looking at long-term? Are we looking at 5 years integration? Is it something that's around the corner, or is it, I think it would have been very useful during this most recent period we went through with COVID, because a number of consumers were seeking assistance. They just weren't coming to OHEP offices and other energy assistance offices. So something like Maryland Think would have been very valuable. So I'm just curious as to where we are now.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton. I agree that integration with the other programs through MD Think and through the eligibility and enrollment platform would have been very helpful over this last year. We have initiated planning with the MD Think team in terms of the development rollout. There have been some delays in terms of the finalization of the eligibility and enrollment system, which is the primary database for the benefit programs. So, you know, we're the last benefit program to go in. I think they're targeting later this calendar year to finalize the full deployment of all the other programs. But we'll start planning, you know, alongside, or the office will start planning alongside MD Think prior to that finalization. The target for integration still remains July 1st, 2022. Now, it's an incredibly short time frame. You know, I've been frustrated by all the delays that we faced in the past, but understand that technical developments of this level are incredibly complex and challenging. But that is still what is out there as the time frame, July 1st, 2022. Now, I will say that we will be filing, and I have drafted a joint chairman's report. So it will be one of the things I do before I leave. So there's a report going to the legislature providing an update on the integration of OHEP into that system, which I think also opens up the opportunity for the other programmatic changes that we've talked about in the past in terms of categorical eligibility. So wherein you're not being processed by two different agencies in two different systems for two different criteria, and they can all be processed for all the benefits all at once. So that report will be going in next month to the legislature. I think we'll detail formally the update in terms of where the department is in terms of rolling energy assistance programs into that system with that report.
Okay, good. I'm glad to see that things are still moving along. I'm curious as to your thoughts regarding what the impacts of incorporating OHEP into Maryland Think. What type of impact will that have on the EUSP program overall? We've regularly heard a number of consumer advocates over the years say that the energy assistance programs that we have currently aren't reaching all the customers. And so if we're integrating with programs that are going to in effect, invite and introduce this program to more consumers, we have a limited amount of funds. You have a budget that's been established for a specific estimated number of applicants. We're looking at potentially an increase of new consumers that will participate because they're participating in other state assistance programs, and now they're eligible for OHEP as well. So what's your thoughts about what kind of budget would we be looking at in 2023 or even 2022 into 2023?
Yeah, I do think it's important to look at the EUSP budget in the context of all the other funds coming in, right? Because we've utilized LIHEAP for some time as the safety net for all the other programs as well, right? So this year we have multiple streams of LIHEAP funds available. What does LIHEAP look like going into the future? I know there's been a bit of talk with various federal budget activities with increasing LIHEAP or adding other components. Because I think it's important to note that even in a standard year, in a non-pandemic year, in any year, we charge all the bill payment benefits to the EUSP ratepayer fund first. And so those would typically be exhausted in any year by November or December. And then we move on to charging the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund for the bill payment benefits. And then when necessary, we utilize LIHEAP to cover any remaining outstanding benefits would be charged to there. So there's no doubt that streamlining enrollment, introducing categorical eligibility would increase enrollment. Our benefits are fairly high at this point. I think that's laid out in the plan. Anytime you're targeting 95% of a bill, you have high benefits. It's probably as high, if not higher, than any other state at this point in terms of targeting of benefits. So there would have to be a balance struck. If you're increasing participation from the mid 20% region up to say 60%, then likely benefit levels would have to be adjusted depending on the availability of federal funds, depending on the availability of the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund, which has fluctuated every year. As you well know, it's gone from 47 to 19 to 31. So that's been a fluctuating revenue stream as well. So we'd have to be looking at adjusting benefit levels. One of the things we haven't done is turn people away for arrearage assistance because funds have expired. That may be something that would come in down the line. But again, what's the level of availability of federal funds out into the future? And what's the availability of the strategic energy investment funds and so on and so forth. So it'll be a complicated dance. I mean, I think prioritizing increased enrollment is a positive. And if we reduce those administrative burdens and streamline enrollment to serve a greater number of people, that to me would be priority, even if some benefits have to be reduced by 10 or 15%, or if certain arrearage benefits need to be curtailed. I think there's greater public benefit to increasing enrollment than maintaining, a $700 average benefit.
I think there's definitely some merit to that point. Well, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Congratulations again on your service and on moving on to greener pastures. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Freeman.
Morning, sir.
Yeah, I have some questions for you. But first, let me add my thanks to your service. Department of Human Services is a huge, relatively large portion of state government, and it's a very big agency, and you have a small chunk of that, a relatively small piece, slice of that department, and your division, nonetheless, is extremely important in the lives of the citizens of the state of Maryland. So, with that small work group, you've really tried to service the citizens of Maryland with limited resources, limited workforce, and I commend you for doing that. It's not an easy task, and I appreciate that. And it was poignantly obvious to me when the legislature tasked the commission, as the chairman alluded to, with getting some of these funds and assistance out the door and figuring out how to effectively do that. So thank you for managing as best you could with the resources you were given to do the job.
Thank you, sir.
I will ask several questions. One is kind of a big picture question, and you alluded to a work group that the secretary is going to lead up. The model that we use to get arrearage management funds out the door at the commission this past year was one that allowed us to get the monies to the utilities. And although that wasn't easy in terms of data and structure and getting the flow right, I think it was appreciated. The feedback I've gotten from various parties, including utilities, some of the utilities, has been that model worked, and it worked effectively, and it worked quickly, and it worked efficiently. Has the department given any thought to that model, to looking into that model or pursuing that model, whether it's statutorily or otherwise, to see if there's an application beyond this extremist situation we find ourselves?
I think that's the great question. I've been an advocate for streamlining enrollment, getting funds out much more quickly, for a number of years, and I do think that work group should take up streamlined eligibility and delivery of funds as a key part of their work. I'd say this, in terms of the greatest challenge, we are dealing with, Office of Legislative Audits. Legislative Audits has been in our house for the last 2 months, right? And that's what drives so much of how we structure the bureaucracy and how we build these administrative burdens for both workers and for customers. So they're looking at the legislation, the regulation, the policy, and looking at every last document, providing them 2,000 documents a day at one point in terms of applications for assistance. Did workers check this, that, and the other system to ensure that this customer was eligible for this, that this household member was actually in the household? So we've built a system of laws, regulations, and policies that really make it complicated for everybody involved. So a single worker is checking 5 different systems to ensure that everything there is accurate. It takes 40 pages of documentation and hours of time to process a single application that was submitted completely by the applicant. And I think what the Relief Act legislation did was clearly define eligible populations, although it could have probably been defined even a little bit more clearly, to deliver that money quickly. And I think if we have legislation, regulations, and then policy that defines well what those populations we're delivering funds to and how we can deliver them, this can all be greatly streamlined. Don't forget that category 1 of the Relief Act, those are folks who have gone through this burdensome process of applying for OHEP over the last 4 years, right? So those folks have gone through the process, been qualified, and I think that that's the question that has to be answered, is how do you identify and set qualifications in a way that is satisfactory for federal regulations, for state regulations, that doesn't increase the burden on workers, that doesn't increase the burden on the applicants. And you know, I hope that we get there. I think there's opportunity on the LIHEAP side to reinvent some of the eligibility criteria. The LIHEAP authorizing statute in the state and the regulations do not define the income limits. It's the EUSP statute that sets the 175 and the 200%, and then we carry that over to the other programs. So we've set this criteria that we're looking at. It's not easy to determine 30-day household income when you're looking at a household of 4, 5, 6 adults, and that's where the major holdup is. That's where the burden is. That's where the money is spent on administration to solve that mystery of what exactly is this household's income in the last 30 days. And it's a great challenge. So I'm sorry, but you know, I agree with your sentiment. I think there are better ways to do this. I think a lot of it can be streamlined toward redefining the eligibility criteria, and the money can flow a lot more easily through that process.
Well, thank you for that. I do appreciate it, and I certainly appreciate your referencing the Office of Legislative Audits. That burden was not lost on the commission when we went through the Relief Act process, and we know that accountability at the end of the day, in hindsight, is something that is difficult to deal with, and we know that scrutiny is appropriate, the oversight is appropriate by the legislature, but it can be challenging, especially when you're in the heat of the battle, you're trying to get stuff done, and then someone's coming back a year later or so and questioning, prove this, show me this, how'd you do this? It's difficult sometimes. So that's not lost on us, and certainly appreciate that. But bureaucracies, as you know, can be maddening, especially when the citizens are looking for help. And I told you this story before, and I'll say it again because it's going to lead to my next question. The application process. I know a college-educated young lady who had arrearages, needed assistance, trying to get her act together. And she has an engineering degree, and she's a certified public school teacher. And she went on her phone, as young people like to do. I convinced her to apply to OHEP. And when she showed me as she was walking through it, and it was maddening. I couldn't have answered the questions, and I know a little bit. I could not have navigated through your system, and it just kept do looping and back and back and back, and it would give you choices, whether they were binary choices or multiple choices, and none of the options seemed to fit the situation. And then you're trying, well, what do they want here? What are they asking for? It's incredibly difficult, and she finally gave up. This is an educated person, engineering degree, certified teacher, very intelligent, higher level, and couldn't do it. And it makes me think, well, how does the average person who doesn't have that education level navigate this stuff? So leading to my question, I know MD Think is coming. It's been promised for a long time, and many of these huge IT systems, as you told us before, you're only a small part of MD Think, not necessarily driving the train on that major IT upgrade. Many of these systems cost hundreds of millions of dollars over many years. I watched a system be built one time, and it included child support enforcement in the state of Maryland. And it went on and on and on and on and on forever. By the time it got implemented, it didn't work, and we spent a lot of taxpayer dollars on it, and it was outdated before it ever got useful, I think. So my question here is, is your office, and I know you're moving on, but is your office looking at improvements to the existing application tools, IT tools, notwithstanding the fact that we have this promised MD Think coming along, which I suspect is going to be a long time coming, and I would be surprised, to be honest with you, that the July 1, 2022 date holds. Is anybody looking at how to improve that, how to make the current application portals work better, more efficiently, more easily?
So I'll speak from our office's perspective. We have not yet been fully engaged on the redevelopment of that online portal. So that is one and the same really as the MD Think process. So if you notice, the URL has changed. It used to be MyDHR, now it's MyMD Think for the online applications. So it was meant to be integrated with the development of the other MD Think platforms. We have documented over time things we'd like to see moving forward as we begin that process of integrating OHEP more deeply into it. I find it a very frustrating system and don't know how somebody of limited literacy or technical ability could navigate it successfully. So we do have good documentation on that within the office in terms of things we'd like to see. In terms of the online application, I think we have an opportunity coming up in the next month to bring some of those issues to the forefront, because we are also charged with implementing the low-income household water assistance program, and we have to get the water assistance program into that online portal. And I think that provides another platform for addressing some of these core concerns of just navigability and understanding everything from the home page all the way through to the questions that are asked that are unnecessary for energy assistance or certain other programs. So, we've, I think, well documented it and brought it up when the time permits, but it's all part of this larger behemoth of rolling out new systems. And it's not the most nimble process for addressing immediate concerns. I share your concerns.
All right, well, hopefully that will be part of your turnover process to relay these types of sentiments to your successor.
Certainly.
It needs to be addressed. We have to get more efficient at helping our citizens. After all, that's what's really important. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Director Freeman, just one question for you. Up next, we'll hear from Baltimore Gas Electric Company, and they are suggesting or proposing that we remove the budget billing requirement going forward. Do you have thoughts on their proposal?
Yes, Chairman. Pardon me. Yes, Chairman. I did not bring it up this time. I'm not sure I brought it up last year because we had plenty of other pressing issues, but I have advocated in the past that the budget billing requirement be removed. I think it does serve as a deterrent and a barrier to some customers. We did meet as a advisory group several times over the last 3 years, really, to discuss it. We've had challenges in quantifying exactly what that impact is. But actually, I have an email in my inbox right now from a woman who's furious for being enrolled in budget billing, and now there's nothing we can do. This comes up from time to time, and that's anecdotal. But I do think that a lot of people read the language and saying you will be enrolled in budget billing, and they choose not to accept a USP. So they're giving up $500, $600, $700 just because they don't want to be in budget billing. I don't think we have any proof that it necessarily improves bill payment behaviors or staying current with the bill. I think many folks do like to just manage their bill as it fluctuates throughout the year and would prefer not to be on budget billing. So even though, unfortunately, we can't present great evidence of the deterrent effect or any negative impact, or I don't think we necessarily can show any benefit to the requirement, I do support their proposal.
Thank you for putting that on the record, Director Freeman. At this time, seeing no additional questions for the director, we will move to our next speaker from the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Good morning, Mr. Ralph.
Yes, good morning, Chairman Stanek, members of the commission. David Ralph on behalf of BGE, DAVID, RALPH. Let me just begin by saying thank you to Mr. Freeman for his important public service. I know I could speak on behalf of our entire energy assistance program team that his collaboration over the years with us, and I know with other utilities, has really been important and instrumental in us moving different programs forward effectively. So thank you again. I have with me David Kahn, who's our manager of energy assistance programs. As we noted in our comments, BGE generally is in agreement and support of OHEP's proposed plan. We have one additional comment that we made, as Chairman Stanek just alluded to, regarding budget billing, but we are in general agreement with that. And Mr. Khan is available for any questions that you may have regarding any of our comments and or the budget billing aspect of it.
Mr. Ralph, the commissioners did read the 5 pages of comments that were filed by Baltimore Gas. As I noted, the only comment that stood out to me was the elimination of the requirement for EOSP grant recipients. Do my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Khan? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. I had just a general question regarding the recommendation to remove the budget billing requirement. And it's probably easiest to try and talk through a possible scenario just so we can follow along with what happens. So if we have a customer, Director Freeman mentioned earlier that he has a customer that just emailed him now that said that she's unhappy about being enrolled in budget billing. So this customer today has a need for resolving a payment plan or an outstanding arrearage with the utility company and gets energy assistance that doesn't pay the entire arrearage. So there's an outstanding balance left over. And the company, of course, following commission earlier orders, would put that customer on a payment plan. Is the company still using a process where they would incorporate the annual usage for that customer over 12 months and rolling that in with the payment plan and making it all one big payment? Or is it truly a separate individual standalone payment plan just on the remaining arrearage?
Commissioner Linton, David Kahn, for the record, DAVID CONN, as Mr. Ralph noted, on the Energy Assistance Program Manager, BGE. And to your question, the way that we would work it, and to not get into too many details, if you'd like me to send details offline, I'd be happy to, but that customer would be presented with obviously a single bill amount each month to pay. That bill amount would be calculated so as to incorporate the outstanding amount due, as you noted, that's left over after the application of the grant, and then divided into 12 equal payments. Now, in your example, if the grant amount was exhausted in reducing the arrears such that there was no grant left to apply over the next 12 months, then really what that customer would be looking at is what we think of as a standard budget billing plan, where they're charged the same amount every month, except that it does incorporate, 1/12 of the remaining arrears. So added to the 1/12 or the monthly budget billing amount, if that makes sense. I hope I didn't confuse things.
No, not at all.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to do is to see if there is a distinction between what OHEP and I guess in general has been referred to as the budget billing program that the commission is required for customers that apply for energy assistance versus the manner in which any unpaid for arrears that exist after a grant has been exhausted, how that's handled. So I'm just trying to see if there's a distinction between the two, and that's fine if there is. I'm not saying that if there's a right or wrong way to this. I'm just trying to make sure I understand if there's a distinction.
Well, I think if I understand your question, to take a different example where the same customer, the grant does not fully exhaust or retire the arrears, so there are leftover arrears. The customer, in some hypothetical new universe, chooses not to enter into budget billing. They would be faced with an arrearage, just as any other customer would. And if the arrearage was large enough, it could put their service at risk. But they would also be eligible, presumably, for a payment arrangement so that they could pay those arrears off over time. I think the outstanding orders from the commission would entitle that customer to a 24-month payment arrangement plan, right, under current rules. So they would have ample opportunity, in some ways longer time, to pay off that arrearage in the payment arrangement than if they were on a straight 12-month budget billing plan. I think the only other thing that I'd add, and sort of in support of what Bill Freeman said, is that we've always viewed budget billing as an option. It's something that we want the customers to be able to decide if it makes sense for them. And I think we've heard anecdotally, is sort of minimizes it a lot, that for some customers it just is not the best option for them. We had a meeting yesterday where Fuel Fund, their program manager, I don't think they're on this call, they cited yet another call that they got of frustration from a customer who didn't want budget billing and was going to reject that EUSP grant because of it. So certainly we'd love for the commission to consider this. I don't know in what format or what form that would take, but that's why we put it in their comments. And the last thing I'll add, and I appreciate your directing the question to me, it gives me the opportunity to thank Bill as well. I'm reminded of an old Joni Mitchell lyric that sometimes you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Bill has been really the very model of a modern public servant, and we've enjoyed so much our relationship working with him. We do expect to continue doing our best to work with OHEP and the state to serve the customers. There are some technical and process enhancements and improvements that we look forward to implementing over the coming months and years that really should streamline that application process, make it easier for everybody. And in different settings, we'd be happy to walk you through some of those.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is something worth looking at a little more. And I guess I'd want to make sure that even if we were to remove budget billing, that in the end, we're all just trying to make sure that customers are able to resolve their arrears and maintain their service in a manner that works best for them. And if there's a better solution than what we're doing now with budget billing, then I think that's something worth exploring.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Khan. At this time, we will.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Khan. Good to see you again, David.
Likewise.
I wanted to ask you, it's not EUSP directly, but I wanted to ask you from BG&E's perspective to give us an update. We get a limited opportunity on follow-up. Give us an update on how BG&E navigated the Relief Fund Acts, Relief Act funds that we sent per the statutory mandate we had. How did it go? What's the status? Kind of give us a little update on that piece of the assistance program.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And again, for this item, I'll do my best. There are others at the company who were more directly involved in some aspects of it. So for maybe a full accounting, we'd be happy to, and I think there may be reports due to you. Overall, I would say it went well. All of the Relief Act grants that you authorized have been paid out, have been credited to customers' accounts. The coordination, Bill mentioned this, the coordination between the commission, the utilities, and OHEP was a challenge, but a really effective process, I think, because that supplemental OHEP grant that they were able to provide to current year customers really did go a long way toward eliminating arrears that could then free up Relief Act grants to help other customers with existing arrears. The methodology that the commission came up with to apply those Relief Act grants, you were obviously bound to some degree by the statute. We did our best then to put into effect the guidance that you had given us. Really, the real question was the Category 3, those customers who were not previous OHEP recipients or seniors or those with medical issues. There were way too many arrears to be covered by the grants. And so we had to come up with a method for applying fractional shares of those grants to those arrears. We worked and certainly communicated with staff about how to tell customers about this so that they could understand it. I won't say that was perfect. There's never a perfect communication. I think some customers were confused about why they didn't get grants or why their grants might have been different amounts than those that their friends or relatives got. It was a learning process, but in the end, we helped a lot of folks. I say we collectively, it wasn't just the utilities, obviously. It was the legislature, it was the work of the commission, it was OHEP. And the fact that the applications are down a bit in the beginning of this fiscal year, I think Bill is right. I think it does reflect that there is less need because of those extraordinary grants. To close, our challenge is going to be to continue outreach and communication to people that we know are going to be in need out there, and make sure that those dollars that OHEP has do get spent on folks who need it the most. And that will be a continuing challenge over the coming year. And so.
Thank you. I appreciate that update, and it's always good to get a verbal. You don't necessarily get it, at least I don't. I'll speak for myself. A full flavor of how something went when you read a report. So, thank you.
My pleasure. And if I could add just one small thing, I should have mentioned it. There was actually a lot of collaboration between all the impacted utilities as well. This was not by no means just a BGE effort. Certainly our colleagues internally at PHI, but also the other utilities. I mean, we worked closely together to try to present to you a consensus view of how this should go so that you could make a better informed decision. So I really want to credit that collaboration. We don't often see it, but we did this time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I would next like to recognize Ms. Cindy Carter. She's the co-founder of the Critical Medical Needs Program, and she's the executive director of the Cancer Support Foundation. Good morning, Ms. Carter.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Cindy Carter, CINDYCARTER. First of all, I want to thank Bill Freeman for working with us. I know it hasn't always been easy to make sure we got the Critical Medical Needs Program in place and passed into law. It's been a real help, especially during this past time of the pandemic. We know that a lot of our very ill citizens have been able to be helped by this program. I have run Cancer Support Foundation for 16 years now. We've done many outreach events to educate our clients on what grants are out there, what help there is. For the first few years, we had no issues keeping lights on. Then over a decade ago, things changed and the power started going off for our clients, and we could not raise enough money to pay the clients' bills. So we started then working with energy assistance offices. The barriers were many, and most of our clients could not manage them. We found the doors were not just closed, but they were locked. We had a lot of challenges. We had a lot of people on all sorts of horrible health situations sitting in the dark. So we did work with getting the Critical Medical Needs Program set up, and it was passed into law in 2019. Now, this program helps people with any kind of illness, not just cancer, to be able to get into the process, get the process done, the grants done, and the power kept on. It is successful because it's a streamlined process and it has customer service. And you're going to hear me talk about that as I proceed. And it was passed in law in 2019. The Critical Medical Needs Program does need a physician cert to be able to get into the program. That means you typically are going to have to work with a navigator, and many times the navigator is the only reason why you can get in to the critical medical needs to get the physician cert. Many of our seniors are unable to be part of the critical medical needs. They may have medical challenges. They are not able to get physician cert. And unfortunately, lack of technology ability working with technology is not a medical condition. So a lot of our seniors are having problems getting into critical medical needs to get the help that is there in this program. The pandemic has really made it apparent that sending people to either do online applications or to get an application and mail it in just is not effective. It's just very, very challenging. I do want to talk about our seniors today. 41% of the people in the state of Maryland that are eligible for energy assistance are seniors. 41%. Those are people identified as 60 years old and above. In 3 years, the youngest of the baby boomers will be 60 years old. And it's been projected that between 2020 and 2040, the rate of increase of those that are hitting the 60-year-old mark and above is a 46% increase. So we have a lot of seniors now. It's projected to have a lot more seniors in the program. And I think from the pandemic, it's shown that unless you really have a knowledge of how to get into the system, you're going to be left out without being able to get in. Unfortunately, OHEP offices are not customer service officers. And I found this out from work with them for over a decade. They're very good at their job of getting the applications and finding out who's eligible, but there's not a customer service component. Critical medical needs has provided that component. Why is it so difficult? Well, if you look at an energy assistance application for this grant, it's 4 pages. 2 of those pages deal with 6 grants that you have to read, understand, find out how does it apply to you? Do you want to use it now? Or basically, what does it even mean? Budget billing, I'm glad that came up. For years, I have hundreds of stories of clients that have walked away from getting energy assistance grants because they found out they had to be part of budget billing. They had an Aunt Susie who didn't have enough taken out, didn't pay enough during the months, came up to the reconciliation that gets done. She now owes $400. She doesn't have the money, her power is going to be turned off. Whether it's reality or not for people, the perception is all the horrible situations that their aunt, their father, their mother, their cousins, all of their friends have. So we've had hundreds of people that have not taken energy assistance grants when they desperately need them because they had to be in budget billing. So we definitely need to address the budget billing. Now, if you can get through the application part and agree to be budget billing and understand the 6 grants that are listed on one application and be able to say, yes, I do want them and I do understand them, then you have the second part of this, which you have to get all your documents together. You have to know what documents exactly, and which can be complicated, very complicated. You have to know then how to get them in. Then once they get in, whether you've done it online or you've mailed it in, you have to hope that those documents get matched up to your application. Then if there's an issue, the communication process between that component and the customer is so very delayed that you get a letter after your several weeks that you're missing something and you have 3 days to get it in. Oh, by the way, the deadline's already hit. So there's a problem of getting the application done. There's a problem of getting all these expansive documents in and get it to the application and the communication. Now, the new law that allows an extra 3 months for you if you're denied to get those documents in, that's a great law. But 3 months or 3 years, it's no help to our seniors if there's no customer service. If there's nobody there that you can actually talk to and find out What are they asking for? What do they mean? I thought that was it. Why is this not the same thing they're asking for? This is a success of the critical medical needs programs. The fact there is customer service. There's somebody there that can go through it. But for the rest of the people, large part our seniors, they can't get into that program. They don't have that same sort of help. The other 67 and above law, I call it, which is phenomenal because it raises the income bracket for those who are 60, have somebody in the household of 67 and above. Great law, but there again, it doesn't help anybody if you can't get through the front door. If you can't get somebody to help you do the application and get the process and get it into the process and get it through, then it's of no value to anybody. Now, the good news is there's an advocacy group called Silver Light that's working on the Silver Lights program that we're hoping to come up with a plan. Some of it would be based on a plan that was started years ago in New Jersey to get large groups of seniors into energy assistance, keep them in energy assistance year after year, and then also provide a customer service element for seniors that say, hey, I'm a senior. I don't understand how to do this application. We're in dire need of some help. Can we get somebody to talk to? Can we get somebody to help us? So this advocacy group, we are working with a wide variety of foundations, state agencies, utility companies to try to come up with a program. Remembering 41% of everybody that's eligible in the state of Maryland is 60 years and old and above. There's a major challenge going to happen. If we keep looking the other way, it's going to be a disaster because the unemployment situation, I think, really was a challenge this year. But if you put seniors in that same situation, you're going to have even a bigger challenge because of their failing health many times and the lack of family help. All we need is a couple seasons of extra hot and extra cold, and you're going to see that the seniors run into a lot of extra challenges. I'm a 4-time caregiver of seniors. I've helped over 16,000 families in the cancer world, and I will tell you that when somebody in a household has an illness or as they get older and start having challenges, family is not there to help them. In the cancer world, we saw about 6 months. Spouses, partners, families, friends, after about 6 months, got tired of dealing with the challenges and they weren't there to help. So you're dealing with a population in the state that is growing and doesn't have family help for a large part, and the customer service element is just not there in the current system we have, unless you can get into critical medical needs program, which, by the way, is run by over 300 volunteer navigators. The word is volunteer. So there's not a big area, not a big program growth to be able to, we're trying to get more people in it, but it's still for the large part run by volunteers that are working with people. We need a more concerted effort in the state of Maryland to look at what can we do to get customer service element into helping some of the most vulnerable. I thank you very much for your time, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you for your comments and the testimony that you filed, Ms. Carter, and for all the work that you are doing for Maryland seniors. I hear some of your concerns. I've heard all of your concerns, and I recognize there is some difficulty with signing up program applicants for these many programs. As you heard Commissioner O'Donnell give that example of a rather sophisticated young lady who had trouble. So it appears that it's not just limited to seniors. Although, as I understand from Director Freeman, his team and the DHS team are well aware of some of these challenges and are attempting to resolve them, simplify, and streamline over the coming year before MD Think is launched. Again, thank you for your testimony. Do commissioners have questions for Ms. Carter? Seeing none, next we'll move to the Office of People's Counsel. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. My
Good
name is-
morning, Mr. Auslander. Your audio is coming in rather soft. If there's a way to increase that, that would be ideal.
Is this better?
A little bit. We'll take it if that's as good as you could get.
Can you hear me now, sir? Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. My name is spelled Jacob, and the last name is Ouslander. I would like to join the sentiments that have been shared this morning, thanking Director Freeman for his service. It's been a pleasure to work with him during his time heading up the Office of Home Energy Programs, and we will surely miss him, but we do thank him for his service. I don't have a large number of prepared remarks today. The comments that we filed highlighted the concern that we've raised in previous years, that we believe the EOSP program is underfunded, both from a level of benefits standpoint and from the large number of eligible households that do not participate in the program at all. In regards to the latter point, we do support OHEP's continued improvements in its eligibility determination process and its planned integration with Maryland Think. We also believe that that OHEP should consider adopting a policy that they used during the pandemic to allow eligible households to sign their applications over the telephone by simply orally signing the documents. So we are a member of the advisory board, and we look forward to continuing to work with OHEP to explore ways to improve the outreach efforts of the office and its ability to make energy affordable to Maryland households. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Auslander, and thank you for the comments you filed with the commission. Do commissioners have questions of Office of People's Counsel? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Mr. Auslander. I was noticing in your comments that, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see that OPC had a position on the concept of removing the requirement of budget billing. Does OPC have a position on that? Did I miss it in the comments?
We did not raise it this year. We have signaled our support for that initiative in the past. We do not believe that budget billing is a necessary component of the program, and we also understand that there are some number of households that choose not to participate in the program because of that requirement. So we would support eliminating the budget billing requirement.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I'll raise this with you. As you know, this concept's got a bit of history to it. It wasn't something that was the commission's idea even, but as you know, it was an initiative that was first started on the utility side. And it was designed to address those concerns where customers had an outstanding arrearage after the application of all of their energy assistance money. And some of those customers had a difficult time paying or obtaining a payment plan to resolve that outstanding amount. So it was even after receiving a grant, you weren't able to resolve the arrearage, and there was still a possibility of collection action. So how does that operate going forward if the budget billing solution is there? And again, I'm in favor of a new solution if we have one. But I remember the time when we didn't use this option, and we had similar customer complaints and concerns raised from consumers that were unable to pay the remaining balance on the arrearage after receiving and exhausting all grant money. And there wasn't any opportunity for them to, they still face collection action. So what is your thoughts on the alternative option? What do we do at that point?
Well, I would share the remarks that Mr. Cohn made earlier, that the budget billing mechanism should remain as an option for applicants, and perhaps it would be more advantageous for certain applicants to enroll in the utilities budget billing program along with their application for energy assistance. And if it, in that sense, I suppose we could sort of have our cake and eat it too. But my actual understanding of the genesis of the budget billing is slightly different. I thought that it actually had to do with how I thought it was a I thought that OHEP was the proponent of the budget billing requirement initially, and that had something to do with making sure that the bill payment assistance would be evenly distributed throughout the year. But admittedly, that this all happened before I came on board with OPC, so I don't have a definitive history of why the budget billing requirement was instituted.
Well, you're partially correct. There was a portion of a requirement that used to be in COMAR that utility companies used to request we waive every year. And I believe we adopted regulations recently that the staff, and it's about everybody, endorsed that removed that requirement. So there's no longer a requirement for the utility companies for a first-time applicant to apply arrearage assistance money to the arrears as it was structured in COMAR many years ago. So that requirement's gone. So I'm assuming that we're talking about, and I could be wrong, but we're talking about the continuing budget billing requirement, that there was a commission directive several years ago. And this actually was before my time back here in the Consumer Affairs Division. But there was a requirement initiated to require customers to go onto a budget billing if they did not have enough funds to pay an outstanding arrearage. So I'm assuming that's the requirement we're talking about. And it's somewhat, doesn't appear as necessary now because in the current environment, we have requirements for all of our utility companies to issue payment plans for consumers that don't have arrears. But that requirement didn't always exist. And so I suppose at some point in the future, when COVID is long past us and we've emerged mask-free, we'll be in a world where that order will not be as necessary anymore because we don't have COVID arrearages anymore. So I suppose at that point, we now will still have consumers with outstanding arrears. But we no longer have the budget billing requirement and no longer have a requirement for utilities to offer payment plans. So I guess I'm really just thinking in a world where protections that we put in place years ago because customers couldn't get plans are gone, and what happens then? So that's, again, I'm all for a better solution if we have one. I'm happy to hear it. But as of right now, I'm hearing that we're removing a protection because of another protection that's temporary. So I was just curious as to what OPC's thoughts were on that.
Well, it's an interesting point, Commissioner, and perhaps it should be explored whether there should be changes made to the payment arrangement requirements in COMAR for customers receiving energy assistance, essentially making the COVID payment plan type mechanism available even after the pandemic conditions cease to exist.
Yeah, it's possible, and it might be something for the work group or one of the work groups to look at a little further. All right. Well, I was just curious about OPC's thoughts on it. I didn't see it in your comments, but I appreciate your response. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And Mr. Freeman, I know I, for one, will miss you, and I hope you have, good luck in your future endeavors. So Mr. Auslander, would you agree then that while OPC may support removing the budget billing requirement, perhaps we're not actually there yet for what happens next? And that perhaps some discussion is necessary for what would happen next? Just sort of, because if the commission were to issue an order, hypothetically speaking, that remove the budget billing, what would happen? How would the bill assistance be applied? Would it be applied and put people's bills for 1, 2, 3 months at zero, and then the assistance is gone? What would we do? Or have we even had sufficient discussions about what we would do?
Well, my understanding, although I suppose now that I'm saying it out loud, it's somewhat uninformed, but my hope would be that the that the energy assistance bill, the bill payment assistance installments could continue to be allotted and distributed on a monthly basis, even in the absence of budget billing. And my understanding is that would be possible, and that would certainly be OPC's preference. We have supported the use of bill payment assistance to pay down arrearages that exist at the outset of the plan, but we do recognize that the program isn't going to function as intended if the entire grant amount is consumed within the first few months of the program year.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that it sounds like a lot of parties are interested in removing the requirement, but at least on my part, I think there needs to be proposals about what would happen if we did remove that requirement before we just take it off, because I think there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I think we might need to answer those questions. So that might be something that we send to a work group, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no additional questions for Office of People's Counsel, we are ahead of our advertised agenda schedule today, so we'll keep moving forward. The last formal presenter before we hear from 2 members of the public is the Commission's own staff. Good morning, Ms. Garofalo.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. I also would like to express my appreciation for the opportunity to work with the departing head of OHEP, and his replacement has some big shoes to fill. Staff recommends the funding budget for ratepayer funds as proposed. We note that the bulk of the monies go to bill assistance, with some money to outreach and processing of applications. Staff appreciates OHEP's contribution to various work groups that have implicated energy assistance in some ways. And with regard to that, I'd like to note for the commission's, the commission I'm sure is aware of this, but in regard to thinking about different ways to apply the OHEP grant, it should be kept in mind that with supplier consolidated billing and community solar, we have entities other than OHEP who wish to, other than the utilities rather, who wish to take on the funds that OHEP traditionally gives to the utilities. And this is a complication in a new, any new way of allocating the OHEP benefit. That having been said, in light of the payment of arrearages and the other legislative enactments, if the commission wants to have a new payment methodology imposed on the utilities. This what might be the same. This might be the right time. And I would also like to note that in looking at how MEAP was distributed during that rulemaking session, the thing that we found out and that surprised us was that there was not a lot of similarity in how MEAP funds were distributed within the utilities. Now, of course, MEAP are not subject to your jurisdiction, but it gave it. We are looking into that right now. We kind of think that there should be some similarity from utility to utility because their customers are probably not that different. But we're just looking at what actually is done and trying to get an idea of the impact of how those funds are dealt with. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Garofalo, for your review of the proposed plan. Do commissioners have questions of staff counsel? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Ms. Garofalo. Just one question. I asked this question to Mr. Freeman earlier regarding the potential of a number of new consumers applying for and receiving energy assistance money because of the establishment of OHEP into the Maryland Think program. You've gone through fairly comprehensively the OHEP budget and how the bill payment assistance and everything will spread out for the course of the next year. I'm curious if you've had any thoughts about how the program would operate in a world where OHEP is integrated into Maryland Think, and we have a number of new consumers who need assistance and who should receive assistance, but we still have the same pot of funds available. So what are your thoughts on
So I think Mr. Freeman talked about this, what is probably a yearly event, which is you come toward the end of the year, people keep coming in, you have to find more money, and he has different pots of money he goes to. Maryland Think has the possibility of increasing the applications exponentially. I don't know that our current allocation is sufficient. However, looking at what happened during the pandemic, I'm also not certain that the applications for EUSP will increase exponentially. I think we almost have to play that by ear, and it may mean that there's a year when the EUSP benefit goes down somewhat while we figure out what to do. I wish I had a silver bullet to offer you and say, well, if that happens, then we can do plan A or B, but I don't. I would like to point out that OPC, I think, is not proposing, but talking about a percentage of income approach. I think that's very complicated. Staff did back that some years ago. We thought at the time it would be very complicated. We thought we might have people who were currently eligible for EUSP who would suddenly not be eligible, and vice versa. So I think any change that the commission were to make, other than a change in the funding, should be thought about long and hard.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the only question I had.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no additional questions for Commission staff, we'll now hear from two interested members of the public, beginning with Ms. Laurel Peltier. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's Laurel Peltier, Laurel. Last name is Peltier. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm going to start with the customer, because it's very interesting. We've been talking about budget billing. It's very complicated. And all I would suggest to everybody is consumer research needs to be part of this, because I've been sitting for the last year and a half directly working with OHEP clients. At the CARES Community Center, we actually have been helping people in person starting in March, because as you know, the sites were all closed. So it is very interesting to talk to somebody about budget billing while you're reading a BG&E bill. So I hope that's part of a working group, because it's the perception of what they're reading, and that bill is extremely difficult when you have OHEP, supplier stuff. So I'm just going to share that. But that brings me to a bigger point. I wrote in my written testimony, one of the most interesting things I found about this OHEP report was that you all didn't see the denial rates for the last 12 years. And I put in there, I pulled out the denial rates from an excellent report that Bill Freeman's team worked with a consultant in 2020. And it was an amazing report for the state. It really laid out a lot of issues. And in there, the number of applications approved has consistently dropped from 2012. And that could be even prior to that. This year, we had 84,000 families get OHEP, and 61,000 families were denied. So 61,000 families attempted this process. And everyone's already been talking about that. It is clear that front door seriously, seriously needs to be examined, and I would argue fixed. And that is because in the context is we've kind of been dancing around these rearages and these big past dues and people still getting OHEP and having a ton to pay off still. That's because we have 365 households who are eligible. We service maybe 20%, and that's amazing for those households. These households are very low income, and their bills have just been going up the last 10 years, which is odd because the rates of energy has actually been going down. So it's very interesting what's happening right now. We have fewer and fewer people getting OHEP. We have utility bills that are going up, which I explained in my written testimony is really just kind of a collision of policies. And then we have like this front door not working. And it really does lead to the question that Ms. Garofalo was talking about is, you know, are we just setting ourselves up for like a very large chunk of our state to not be able to pay our utility bills? I put in my testimony 2 BG&E bills, which I did on purpose because I wanted everyone to see what the customer sees. It's a pretty complicated bill, but we have stride charges, which just are really starting to pile on. So the amount for the average OHEP person was $2,204 for the year. That's their yearly bill. And I can tell you, no customer knows that. That's part of the issue with all this. People are like, how much is my yearly bill? And then if you have a third-party supplier on top of that, which will go away in January, this premium, you'd be at $2,830, $2,830 for households that make $20,000 or less. What Energy Advocates, which I'm chairing, and what Cindy Carter's getting into is, it's great. It's time for our state to start looking at, I would suggest, the PSC, that's why Energy Efficiency Group's on next, is starting to look at this OHEP bill in total. Because that energy burden is extremely high. We have this fixed OHEP budget. We're just not going to be able to help a lot of people. It'll be interesting to see where this all plays out. So I think there's a real opportunity. I know our group is really starting to pull together some experts, and we're going to go out there hat in hand to the utilities, to state experts, to other states, and look at this more comprehensively. Is there an opportunity for our state after 20 years of USEP to better manage this, to more comprehensively look at this low income bucket, which is, you know, 365,000 out of 2.3 million households. And while the PSC is looking at rate cases and community solar and stride, retail choice issues, to really start looking at it from a consumer's point of view, what we've kind of come to as a bigger group is this just doesn't seem sustainable. And it's such a great time to start a state working group, which many people have told me we've looked at a lot in the past. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of great stuff that happened. I will tell you, it's been amazing working with Bill Freeman's team and Bill. Last year and a half, many cases, they had to personally help us because we were helping some pretty rough cases that actually found a little open community center in the back of a church. But our team is really looking at this comprehensively, and we really ask the PSC to help us because these are really, really big issues. But I would argue I don't see how a $2,830 utility bill for a low-income family is just going to work in the next 10 years. So I really appreciate your time. I also just wanted to say I really appreciate the PSC's time on working on SB 31 and the Guaranteed Savings Plan for the retail choice for this bucket of customers. It's going to be a huge help. The price premiums are still pretty extraordinary. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peltier, and thank you for your work with the underserved communities.
You're welcome.
We'll finally hear from Mr. Raymond Niveau. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Great. My name is Raymond Niveau. That's R-A-Y-M-O-N-D, last name Niveau, N-E-V-O. And I just want to thank the Commission for allowing me to speak today. I am a Maryland resident, and I am also the State and Equity Policy Manager at the National Housing Trust. In that role, I co-lead the Maryland Energy Efficiency Advocates Coalition. And I know that the Commission is familiar with our coalition, but just for the record, wanted to share that the mission of our coalition is to make low-income multifamily housing more affordable, energy efficient, and sustainable. This is not my first time testifying to the Commission, nor is it my first time testifying on housing and energy matters in general. At this point, those who work in the field may consider me an expert of sorts in this work. And while that is an identity that I am very proud of and have worked very hard for, today I bring forth my identity as the very resident that we are speaking about. I myself grew up in deteriorated housing in a 2-bedroom apartment being raised by my grandmother. Our apartment had leaky windows, poor insulation, mold, and still we needed a housing choice voucher to afford it. And as I got older, I started to suffer from a variety of health issues. I was eventually diagnosed with asthma. Later on, my grandmother was also diagnosed with asthma, and in the final years that she spent in that apartment, up until 2017, she was in and out of the hospital regularly because the mold had spread through the unit. So it has been that life experience that has led me to get into this work and really drives me every day to be an advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves, or even worse, those who have been ignored. And, you know, I know what that feels like. I know the feelings of frustration and anger that come with that. I share this story because in this work, we are looking at a large amount of numbers. We look at numbers of households and we talk about these issues in quantity. And I want to remind everyone, which I've done before, but I want to do again, that each of these numbers is an actual individual person. This is my grandmother. This is so many other grandmothers, grandfathers. Cindy referenced nearly 50% of those eligible are going to be in that age range soon. You know, mothers, fathers, children. So I would like the Commission to not only hear us, but the commission, utilities, other advocates to work with us. As Laurel explained, there are a lot of varying issues out there, and there are a number of potential solutions that have been discussed, and I want to share my support for two of them. One being a study of the programs and how they work, and that study being conducted by a third party, not a utility or not an agency that's being studied. And the second is really a major support of increased community outreach. It's the phrase community outreach has come up a number of times today, which I really appreciate. And to you, Chairman Stanek, I really wanted to share my appreciation for you. I was really happy and encouraged to see you in attendance at the Power in the Park event last month. And that event, as you saw, was quite successful. It had a very large turnout. And the reason for that turnout was because of the direct us to the community outreach, boots on the ground effort that we put into that. It was not convenient. It was a lot of hard work, but we realized that if we want to create equitable access and mitigate a lot of the issues that Chairman O'Donnell brought up in the application process, that so many others that Cindy's brought up in the application process, if we want to mitigate those issues, then we have to get even further involved in the community, and we have to be there and doing the hard work. So I appreciate the time to speak today. I firmly believe that in order to create equitable solutions, that the folks who are being impacted the most by those solutions, by those policies, must be involved in the conversation. And so I look forward to working with all of you in the future as we work to improve Marylanders' livelihood in general. And finally, I would also like to thank Bill Freeman. I have not been able to work with you directly, but we have worked together indirectly. And so I know that your job is not easy, and I appreciate that you've done it for so long and done it well. And thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Niveau, for your comments, placing them on the record, as well as the two proposed recommendations that you just shared with us. Before we conclude, I'd just like to check to see if there are any other members of the public that wish to address the commission this morning. Seeing none, I'd like to thank OHEP for all of its work in preparing the report, all of the state agencies in responding, along with BGE and the interested members of the public this morning. Similar to prior years, the commission will take all of this written and oral testimony under advisement before issuing a determination with respect to OHEP's proposed EUSP operations plan for fiscal year 2022. The commission endeavors to issue an order in this docket 8903 within the next few weeks. So thank you again. Again, thanks to Director Freeman. We wish you well. With nothing else on today's hearing, this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you. Off the record.